My name is Helena. I'm 58 years old, and until yesterday, I believed I had built a quiet life. It was 7:12 in the morning when the phone rang. I had just finished watering the orchids on the porch. The sun was soft, the ocean breeze gentle, and for a second, everything felt exactly like it had for the past 10 years. Predictable, safe. Then I heard her voice. "Mom," my daughter Clara said, without a trace of hesitation, "your beach house and your car are sold. Tomorrow, we're leaving." I blinked, unsure if I had heard right. "What did you just say?" "I already handled everything. We're starting fresh. You'll thank me later." There was no room for argument in her tone, no softness, no time for explanations. Only a decision already made, wrapped in urgency. I didn't understand. "Why would you do that?" I asked, my voice trembling. "I didn't agree to anything, Clara." "It's not about agreeing, Mom. It's about surviving." She hung up. I stood there, phone still in hand, staring at the horizon where the ocean met the sky. The waves kept coming in, careless. My heart pounded against my chest like a drum, and the silence of the house behind me suddenly felt heavy, as if something had already been lost. I had bought this house after my husband passed. It was supposed to be my peace, my little piece of heaven. After years of fighting for his treatments, after the cancer took more than just his body, it took parts of me too. Clara had always said the beach house was too quiet, too far from everything. She called it Mom's escape pod. She wasn't wrong. But now, it was gone. Sold without my consent. I looked around at everything I had chosen for this life. The wooden wind chimes, the faded photograph of me and my late husband by the fireplace, the hand-woven rug I bought at the fair with my pension money. None of it felt safe anymore. By noon, two strangers arrived to inspect the house. A tall woman in a navy suit introduced herself as Marta. "We're just finalizing the paperwork," she said, with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "You'll need to be out by tomorrow." "Excuse me?" I asked, confused. "This is my home. You can't just come in here." "You signed a power of attorney 2 years ago, didn't you?" she asked, flipping through a folder. "I had, after my surgery. Clara said it was for emergencies only." Apparently, this counted. I felt like a guest in my own house, like a ghost of the woman who once thought she was in control of her life. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the kitchen with the lights off, listening to the sound of the fridge humming and replaying every conversation I'd ever had with Clara in the past year. She'd been asking about money, about my savings, about the pension, about that investment I made with the bank last winter, a high-yield plan she had insisted I open. It had sounded too good to be true, but it was my daughter. I trusted her. Now I couldn't help but wonder, was this always the plan? The next morning, she arrived with 2 suitcases and a tight smile. "Come on, Mom, let's go. I'll explain everything in the car." I looked at her, my daughter of 32 years, and barely recognized her. She was wearing clothes too expensive for someone who worked at a nonprofit, a phone that buzzed constantly with notifications, and behind her eyes, something restless. "Clara," I said slowly, "are you in trouble?" Her silence was answer enough. She bit her lip and opened the trunk. "Please just trust me. We need to go." "I deserve the truth?" "You'll get it. On the way." I took one last look at the beach house, the home I had built with broken dreams and slow hope. Then I stepped into the car, not knowing if I was walking away from safety or toward the edge of something I wasn't prepared for. As we drove inland, I saw the ocean disappear in the rear view mirror. I whispered to myself, Lord, if this is a test, please show me what I'm meant to learn. Because right now, I don't know who to trust. Autumn came quietly. The leaves turned golden, and the air grew crisp. Clara had been fulfilling her supervision terms without fail. The thrift shop was growing, thanks to Ruth's vision and Clara's dedication. They started organizing weekend events, clothes drives, soup days, and free haircuts for seniors. People began trusting Clara, bit by bit, like soil healing after a fire. One evening, while preparing donations, Ruth looked at her and said, You know, you've become someone this town leans on. Clara smiled, but didn't respond. She was still learning how to accept grace. But under that surface of peace, I felt something off. I started noticing a black car parked across from our house some nights. It never stayed long, never moved, but always returned. I mentioned it to the sheriff. She nodded grimly. We haven't caught Victor. He knows you talked. He may be watching. It was like a shadow returning just as we were learning to walk in the light. We reinforced the doors, changed routines. Ruth installed motion lights at the shop. But fear settled again. This time, not from betrayal, but from what could still come for us. One night, I found Clara sitting on the back steps, hugging her knees. He's coming, isn't he? I sat beside her. I don't know, but if he does, we'll be ready. She turned to me. I want to protect you this time. You already are. We spent the next days in a strange rhythm. Peaceful mornings, nervous nights. At church, we lit candles. Ruth gathered a few of us in prayer each Wednesday. She read a verse that lingered with me all week. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. Isaiah 43:2. It became my whisper every night. Then, one morning, a letter arrived in our mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Inside, a photo of Clara standing outside the thrift shop, and a note. One more mistake, and she disappears. Clara's hands trembled as she read it. This is my fault. No, I said firmly. It's his sin, not yours. But she looked at me with fear that cut deep. We can't keep living like this. No, I agreed, we can't. It was time to end this, to close the door on the past that kept knocking. Ruth had an idea. It was dangerous, but it might work. She called the sheriff, and the trap was set. It was a Sunday evening. Clara and I walked to the thrift shop like any other day, arms full of donation bags. But this time, the sheriff's team was already in place, hidden, watching. Ruth had agreed to stay late, pretending to lock up, then slip out the back. Clara would remain at the front counter, alone, vulnerable, the bait. We'd received another note the day before. Sunday, 6 p.m. Be ready. Clara didn't flinch. I won't run anymore. We had rehearsed everything. The moment Victor stepped in, the officers would wait until they had what they needed. An attempt to intimidate, to extort, or to threaten. All Clara had to do was stay calm. I waited in Ruth's house across the street, heart pounding. 6:05 p.m., then 6:11. No one. Then the doorbell above the thrift shop rang. A tall man in a black coat entered, hands in his pockets. Victor. Through binoculars, I saw Clara stand. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice calm. Victor smiled. "You already have." He stepped forward, too close. "I warned you." "But you talked anyway." Clara didn't step back. "I gave the sheriff everything. There's nothing left for you here." Victor leaned closer. "Are you willing to lose your mother over this?" That's when it happened. The sheriff burst through the back door with 2 officers. "Hands where we can see them." Victor turned, startled, but didn't resist. He raised his hands. "Easy. I'm just shopping. Then you won't mind answering a few questions downtown." Within minutes, he was in handcuffs. As they let him out, Clara stepped back, visibly shaking. I ran across the street and held her before her knees gave out. "It's over," I whispered. "I thought I was strong," she said, crying. "But I was terrified." "You were strong," I said. "You stayed. You faced him." Later that night, after statements and paperwork, we returned home. Exhausted, relieved. Ruth brought us warm soup and sat with us in silence. Then she whispered, "Sometimes the devil doesn't come with horns. Sometimes he wears expensive suits and promises fast solutions. But in the end, he always demands more than he gave." I held Clara's hand. This wasn't just justice. It was mercy. Because now we had a real chance to begin. He vanished before the raid, she told us. We believe he had help, and he might still come looking. I nodded, swallowing hard. "What do we do?" "You keep living," she said, carefully. It was a strange kind of freedom, like walking through a fog and knowing there's still danger, but also light. One morning, I went to the bank, not to withdraw anything, but to ask Daniel a question. "When you first flagged Clara's activity," I said, "why didn't you report her?" He looked up, surprised. "Because I saw something different in her eyes," he said. "Most people just lie better. She didn't even try." He paused. "And because you came in after her, not with anger, but with hope. That's rare." On my way out, I saw the same teller who had whispered about Clara weeks before. She avoided my eyes, and that was enough for me. Meanwhile, Ruth began preparing a small group at church, a support circle for people rebuilding their lives after financial collapse. She asked me to speak. I hesitated. Me? What did I have to offer? "I'm not a preacher," I said. "No," Ruth replied, "but you're living proof that even the deepest betrayal can birth forgiveness." So I stood one evening under the soft glow of the church lights and told our story. No embellishment, no drama, just truth. And people listened, not with pity, but with recognition, because everyone in that room had lost something: a job, a spouse, a child, a future. And they needed to hear that loss wasn't the end, that betrayal could be survived, that even when all is stripped away, faith can remain. Clara found steady work 2 months later. Not glamorous, not high-paying. She started helping Ruth full-time at the church's thrift shop, which was run by volunteers and mostly served people living paycheck to paycheck. She didn't complain. She came home tired but peaceful. "I don't need more," she said one evening as we folded laundry. "Just enough. And to do things right this time." I nodded. It was the first time in years I believed her. I began gardening again. Our backyard, once overgrown and forgotten, now had rows of tomatoes, basil, and daisies. Clara helped on weekends. We dug side by side, in silence mostly, but with a comfort that felt new. One Saturday, as we planted marigolds, Clara asked softly, "Do you think Dad would forgive me?" I wiped dirt from my hands, looked up at her. "He loved you too much not to." She closed her eyes. "I miss him." "I do too." There was no need for more words. Our days grew quieter, but also fuller. I began tutoring 2 girls from church in reading, daughters of a woman who had lost her job. Clara and I baked together again. We watched old movies. We prayed before meals. We laughed more. And I noticed something strange. We had less, but I felt richer. One night, Clara came home with a letter from the courthouse. Her case regarding the fraudulent use of my identity was closed. Because she had confessed early, returned partial funds, and cooperated with the sheriff's investigation, she wouldn't be sentenced to prison, but she would be placed under supervision for 1 year, weekly check-ins, financial limitations. She read it out loud, then looked at me. "I'm ready." I smiled. "You already started paying it back, Clara. Every day." She exhaled, and I saw it. The girl I'd raised, not the perfect one, but the honest one. A week later, Daniel from the bank stopped by the thrift store. He wasn't in uniform, just jeans and a t-shirt. He brought a box of old books to donate. Clara smiled awkwardly. "Thanks." Daniel hesitated, then said, "Everyone falls. It's how you get up that shows who you are." He glanced at me and nodded before leaving. Clara watched him go. "Do you think people can really forget the worst thing you did?" I shook my head. "Number?" But the next morning, the house was cold. Not from weather, summer still clung to the air, but from the absence of words. Clara had barely eaten. I'd barely slept. But something shifted when we opened the front door. On the porch lay a package. No name, no note, just a small black box. Clara picked it up slowly, her hand shaking. Inside, there was a flash drive. We looked at each other, unsure. I brought the old laptop from my room, plugged it in. The file had no title, just a timestamp. Clara clicked it open. A video. At first, just static. Then a face. Mateo. "I told you it was simple," he said into the camera, his voice smooth. "But you had to get greedy." Clara gasped. It was a recording of a video call. Her voice echoed in the background, nervous, eager. "I can pay back double," she said on the tape. "Just give me more time." "I don't deal in time," Mateo said on the video. "I deal in leverage." Then he said something chilling. "You said your mom still had assets. If she doesn't give, we take." The screen froze. I felt the floor beneath me tilt again. Clara covered her mouth, her eyes wide. I never thought he recorded this. It was proof, not just of her desperation, but of the trap she'd fallen into, and now of the people still watching us. That night, Ruth came by. We told her everything. She watched the video, listened in silence, then said quietly, "We need to go to the sheriff." "No," Clara said quickly. "It'll ruin both of us. The fraud, the loans, the money I stole." Ruth shook her head. "No more hiding, Clara. The enemy's already at your door. You think darkness protects you, but it only feeds what's after you." Her voice softened. "You may have failed, child, but the Lord hasn't." She stood and placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "You want to start over? Start with truth." The next day, we went to the sheriff. We gave them everything. The flash drive, the account logs, even Clara's confession. It was terrifying. But it was also the first time Clara looked me in the eye without flinching. The sheriff, a tall woman with eyes that had seen too much, took notes carefully. "You're lucky," she said finally. "We've been tracking Mateo for years. You might have just given us what we needed." She promised protection, promised to watch the house. But fear doesn't disappear with promises. Still, something inside me felt lighter. That night, Clara came into my room. She sat at the edge of the bed like she used to as a girl. "Mom," she whispered, "if I end up in prison, will you still talk to me?" I looked at her, at the woman she'd become through fire and failure, and I said the only thing I knew was true. "Even if I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, because God is with me, and so are you." She wept in my arms. For the first time in months, I held my daughter again. Not the broken pieces, but the whole of her, scars and all. The sheriff kept her word. A patrol car passed by the house every morning. We were advised to stay indoors after dark. And Clara, she quit her job at the bank. Too risky, too visible. Instead, she volunteered at Ruth's church, cleaning, organizing food baskets, folding bulletins. It didn't pay, but it healed something in her. One afternoon, as I helped sort donations, Ruth leaned close. "She's not the same girl who came here," she said. "I know," I replied. And it was true. Clara had stopped hiding. She told people the truth about her past. She stood up in church and admitted what she'd done. Not the details, but the weight. "I made mistakes," she said to the small congregation one Sunday. "I betrayed the one person who never stopped loving me, and I'm not asking to be liked, just to be seen again." Some people clapped, others just nodded. But no one turned away. Back home, I saw her praying in the mornings. Not long, not loud, but enough. Enough to make me believe that maybe redemption wasn't just a word in Ruth's mouth, but not all consequences disappear with confession. A week later, the sheriff called. They had arrested Mateo, but Victor was gone. Six months later, the town felt different. Not because it changed, but because we had. Clara's supervision period ended early. Her cooperation, volunteer work, and testimony helped dismantle part of a larger financial ring. Victor was charged and sentenced. Mateo, too. And Clara was cleared of any remaining charges, with the condition of full transparency moving forward. The sheriff shook her hand when it was over. "You did more than survive," she said. "You stood up. That matters." Ruth cried that Sunday in church when Clara read the announcements like she always did now. Confident, steady, free. As for me, I still lived in the same little house at the edge of town. But now, it was a home. The garden bloomed in full colors that spring. Ruth helped plant new trees. Daniel sometimes joined us for lunch. Yes, Daniel. He and Clara had started walking together after church, then sharing coffee, then laughing more than I'd seen her laugh in years. One evening, I asked her, "Is he special?" She smiled. "I don't know yet, but he's kind, and I'm not scared around him." That was enough for me. I had started teaching basic financial literacy at the church, just the basics. How to avoid traps, how to ask for help before it's too late. People came, listened, asked questions. I even shared our story once, nervous at first, but Ruth smiled at me from the front row, and I knew it was right. Some still whispered, but most embraced us, because every town has broken people. Every family wounds, and when someone rises again, not perfectly, but honestly, it gives others permission to hope. One night, I sat alone on the porch, watching the stars. Clara came out quietly. She brought a worn Bible, the same one that once held hush money and fear. She opened to the bookmarked page, Joel 2:25. And I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten. Her voice trembled. He did, Mom. He really did. I nodded and whispered, Yes, he did. The days after the loan incident felt like walking on broken glass. Claire insisted it wasn't her. She swore she hadn't touched my documents since the last mistake. But trust, once fractured, doesn't heal quickly. I'm not that person anymore, she said one night, her voice low. But nobody sees that, not even you. I wanted to believe her. I truly did. But fear had planted itself deep inside me. Fear that tomorrow, I might wake up with even less than today. I began locking my bedroom door at night. Not because I thought she'd hurt me, but because I needed space to breathe. Meanwhile, whispers began to circle the town. People at the church glanced longer. At the bank, Daniel stopped being warm and started being formal. And Ruth? She remained my only anchor. You're in the furnace, Helena, she said gently. God does his best, refining there. But I wasn't sure if I was being refined or reduced. Then, one Friday morning, something unexpected happened. A man showed up at our door, mid-40s, suited, calm, introduced himself as Victor Lorne. I'm here on behalf of a private investor, he said. They're interested in Clara, specifically her debt. I stood, stunned. What kind of interest? He smiled faintly. She owes someone more than just money, and she made promises, ones she hasn't kept. I stepped outside, closing the door behind me. You can't just show up here and threaten her. I'm not threatening, he said softly. I'm warning. Your daughter played in deep waters, and now the tide's turning. He handed me a business card. No need to call. I'll be back in 3 days. And then he was gone. Inside, Clara was pale. She recognized the name on the card. It's the man I trusted with the investment, she said. He worked with someone named Mateo. I thought it was legitimate. I sat down, heart pounding. Clara, I whispered. How much do you owe him? She hesitated, then said the number. I couldn't speak. It was more than my house had been worth. You were trying to pay off one lie with another, I said, my voice hollow. She nodded. I didn't know how deep I was falling until I hit the bottom. 3 days. That's what we had. We couldn't go to the police, not without exposing everything, including the fraud with my name. So we made a plan. It was desperate, but we had no other choice. Clara would go to Ruth's and stay hidden. I'd go to Daniel at the bank and try to negotiate an emergency release of the remaining pension funds. I hated the idea, but it was all we had. When I arrived, Daniel looked up, surprised. I need to cash out everything, I said. He hesitated. That's not advisable, Helena. You'll lose half to penalties. I leaned closer. Then let me lose half, but don't let me lose her. He didn't ask questions. He saw the fear in my eyes. Later that night, I brought the cash home, tucked it inside the old Bible Ruth had given me. I sat there, staring at the verse again. And I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten, I whispered. Lord, if you still restore, now's the time. When Victor returned, I was waiting on the porch. No Clara, no negotiation, just me and the Bible. He raised an eyebrow. I handed it to him. He opened it, saw the money, counted it, then looked at me. This isn't the full amount. It's all we have, I said. Take it, and don't come back. He studied me for a long time. Then he gave a small, cold smile. For now, he said, and walked away. I stood there until I couldn't feel my legs anymore. Then I went inside. Clara came back hours later, silent. I didn't say anything. We just sat at the table, a mother, a daughter, and a silence full of shattered trust and the tiniest seed of something else. Maybe forgiveness. The road twisted through dry fields and half-abandoned gas stations. I kept glancing at Clara, but she didn't meet my eyes. Her fingers tapped restlessly on the steering wheel, her jaw clenched. After an hour, I broke the silence. Where are we going, Clara? To a place where we can start over, she said. It's quiet, cheap. I already rented a small house. You'll like it. I frowned. A small house? What happened to your apartment? She exhaled hard. It's gone. Sold it too. My stomach tightened. And what about your job? There was a pause. I left it. The silence between us deepened, stretching across the dashboard. Then she added, I had no choice. There were debts, Mom, credit cards, loans. I thought I could fix it with those investments. But the market dropped, and She looked at me, finally. I lost everything, including your money. I didn't speak. It wasn't rage I felt. It was the sound of something shattering quietly inside me. Clara had always been impulsive, always believed that things would work themselves out. But this was deliberate, planned, and I had let it happen, blindfolded by love. We drove past a faded sign that read, Weston Hills, population 2,218. The main street was lined with shuttered stores and one stubborn bakery still open. A wrinkled man swept the sidewalk in front of it. He looked up, nodded at us, and kept sweeping. The house was at the edge of town, a white wooden thing sagging in places with paint peeling from the porch rails. It smelled like old rain and forgotten years. Inside, there were 2 bedrooms, a living room that barely fit the couch, and a small kitchen with creaky cabinets. The fridge hummed like the one back home. Except this wasn't home. I set my suitcase down and turned to Clara. What now? She rubbed her eyes. We stay low. I get a job. We rebuild. We? I asked, sharp. She looked away. That night, I stood outside and looked at the stars. The silence here wasn't the soft ocean hush I was used to. It was heavier, like the town had secrets buried in its soil. A neighbor appeared the next morning, a woman in her 60s, holding a pie. "Name's Ruth," she said with a crooked smile. "You're the newcomers. Thought you might need something sweet." I thanked her, surprised. People in the city didn't do this anymore. She glanced at Clara's expensive handbag tossed on the porch chair. "You two running from something or running toward it?" she asked casually. I blinked. She chuckled. "This town sees everything, honey. Might as well be honest with it." Ruth had sharp eyes. She'd lived here all her life and ran the small church just off Main Street. Her husband had died in a tractor accident, and her son had left for the city 10 years ago. She visited every week after that pie. "You remind me of me," she said one evening, tired, but still standing. I liked Ruth. She didn't ask for details. She just sat with me, sometimes in silence, sometimes humming hymns. One day, as we sorted through the pantry, she found an old Bible. "You still believe?" she asked gently. I hesitated. "I used to." She opened it and pointed to a verse with her weathered finger. "And I will restore to you the years that the locust hath eaten." Joel 2:25. Her voice trembled just a little. It means even what feels stolen can be redeemed. Those words stayed with me. Ruth began taking me to church again, a small wooden chapel with a bell that cracked slightly every Sunday morning. I didn't sing the hymns, not yet, but I listened. Clara, meanwhile, spent her days searching for work. She came home late, tired, distant. She wouldn't talk much, but I could see the guilt weighing on her, and I could feel my own heart pulling in two directions. Some days I wanted to scream at her. Other days, I wanted to hold her like she was a child again, curled in my arms after a nightmare. We were both broken in ways we hadn't yet learned to say aloud. Then, one afternoon, I found Clara in the backyard, crying. "I got a job," she said between sobs. "A cleaning position at a local bank. It's all I could find." I knelt beside her. She looked so small then. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. Maybe we had nothing. But maybe that was exactly where God would begin to build something new. The job at the bank turned out to be more than Clara expected. She came home with red hands from chemicals and stories about employees whispering behind her back. "They know I'm not from here," she said one night, dropping her purse on the floor. "They treat me like some spoiled girl who lost her toys." I didn't respond, because part of me agreed. But I also saw her trying, waking up early, walking 2 miles to save on gas, even skipping lunch so we could stretch what little we had. One evening, while sorting mail, I found a letter addressed to me from the investment firm Clara had used. I hadn't heard from them since everything collapsed. The letter was short, formal, but one line stood out. "A preliminary investigation suggests that significant sums were transferred to a private account under your daughter's name." My hands trembled. I sat down, the letter open on my lap, staring at the words like they would rearrange into something less cruel. That night, I confronted Clara. "I got a letter." She froze in the kitchen, her back turned. "It says you moved the money, that it wasn't a loss. It was stolen." Still silent, I stood. "Is it true?" She didn't cry this time, just nodded. "I thought I could double it," she whispered. "There was a guy. He promised returns, fast ones, but then he vanished. You stole from me." Her eyes filled with tears. I thought I'd give it back before you ever knew. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to? I said, voice rising. You sold my house, my car, my life. For what? A stranger's promise. She fell to her knees. I've ruined everything. I wanted to scream, to slap the air between us, to make her feel what I felt. But I didn't. Instead, I walked out. I went to the only place I knew I wouldn't shatter. Ruth's house. She listened. She didn't interrupt. Then she said something I didn't expect. You're allowed to grieve her. That caught me off guard. She's not dead, I said bitterly. No, Ruth said. But the daughter you thought she was is. And that deserves mourning. I cried that night like I hadn't cried since burying my husband. It wasn't about the money anymore. It was about betrayal. It was about trust crushed under the weight of desperation. The next morning, Ruth handed me an old journal. Start writing, she said. Write what you want to say, but can't speak. So I did. I wrote about the way Clara's laughter used to fill our home, about the time she brought home a stray puppy and named it Miracle, about the day she held my hand during chemo and whispered, You're stronger than this. Where had that girl gone? And what had the world done to twist her into someone who would trade love for lies? Meanwhile, Clara barely spoke to me. She kept her head down, went to work, came home, and slept on the couch. We lived in the same house, but in separate worlds. Until one afternoon, the bank called me. I thought it was about Clara's cleaning job, but it wasn't. The manager, a young man named Daniel, had questions. Your name came up in a flagged transaction, he said. Someone tried to open a loan under your social security number. I sat there, stunned. No, that's not possible. I haven't touched anything. He paused. We traced it. It was attempted from this address. The floor tilted. I couldn't breathe. Not again. Not after everything. When Clara got home, I was waiting at the table. I didn't say a word, just handed her the printed form. Her eyes widened. Then she fell into the chair, shaking. It wasn't me, she said. I swear. But I'd heard that voice before, the voice of someone losing control. The walls around us felt too close, the silence between us too loud. I didn't know what to believe anymore. Was she still digging deeper into a hole I couldn't pull her from? Or was something, or someone else involved?